All right, hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to tonight's video where we're gonna talk a little bit about snowboard maintenance, specifically how to wax a snowboard. What I've got here in front of me is one of my most prized possessions. This is my Gentum Stick Superfish that I got all the way from Japan when I went there on vacation last year. And although this thing has a wicked factory tune on it, I've ridden it maybe 5 or 6 times now, and it's getting a little dry. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wax this snowboard up. I'm gonna show you guys the process of putting the wax on and then the process of taking the wax off to make sure that this thing stays super fast and carries a lot of speed, especially in flat spots. So the 4 critical things that you're going to need to wax a snowboard is first, obviously, a waxing iron. That's what you're actually going to apply the wax with. The second thing is the wax itself. I personally use the Dakine hot wax. Dakine wax you might want to use yourself. I use the All Temp wax, which is sort of like their do everything all variety wax. You can see here that it works from -8 degrees Celsius to -2 degrees Celsius. So it hits a pretty big sweet spot as far as the temperatures that we'll experience here on the mountain. The third thing that you'll need is a scraper tool. This is designed to scrape the wax off of the snowboard after it's been applied and it's dried. Finally, we've got the Nylon Brush here. There's a couple of different types of brushes on the market, but if you're only gonna buy one, get the Nylon Brush. It's sort of like your universal, everything purposed brush. All right, so without further ado, we'll move right along into it. You guys can see here that I've removed the bindings off of my snowboard so that it can lay nice and flat. And I've got my waxing iron preheated so that it's all ready to melt the block of wax. I like to set my waxing iron to medium temperature. You'll see most of these waxing irons have a gauge on the back of the iron. I like to just set mine to medium, that way you know it's not gonna burn the wax, but it's also gonna be warm enough that it melts it fairly quick. When I'm actually melting the wax on the iron, I like to give it firm pressure, even distribution, and then tilt the iron sort of at like a little bit of an angle here so that the wax drips off the bottom corner onto the snowboard. That way you're not creating too much of a mess on the bottom of the iron. All right, the next step is to take the iron and actually press it down on the snowboard to move around the melted wax that we've just laid onto the base. We're gonna try to make nice even strokes, and you can see here, guys, that as I apply a little bit of pressure, a little bit of weight, it evenly starts to melt that wax down into its liquid form, creating a nice layer, and that way we're encouraging every single pore to open up nicely and absorb as much wax as possible. We have to give it about 10 minutes to let the wax solidify again, harden and dry before we can scrape it off. The whole concept here is that when the board gets nice and hot, all of the pores of the base expand and open up. This is allowing them to absorb the most amount of wax for when we actually get that wax on the base. Then, once the base goes back to being room temperature and it cools off, all of those pores slightly tighten again, trapping the wax in the base of the board. The next step is to take a scraper and scrape the wax off of the base. You can see that I'm trying to make nice, even, long strokes, very similar to how I actually melted the wax onto the board in the first place. And by keeping those strokes vertical, we just make sure that we're creating a nice dynamic channel for that wax to plane off the snow downwards through the board. Finally, you're gonna wanna use a nylon brush to add some structure to the bottom of your snowboard. It's arguable about how much you're actually gonna need to buff out the bottom of your board, but ultimately, it just makes the board look nice and finished and super smooth. So what you're gonna wanna do is take your brush like so and just create these sort of back and forth motions, and that creates a nice channel or texture for the water to run down when it's passing through the base of the board. I've got this handy dandy rotary buff brush. It actually attaches to a drill so that it speeds up the process for you. But if you don't have one of these handy dandy utensils, not to worry, a horsehair brush will do the same effect. All right, so that's the finalized product. You can see the base looks way more hydrated. It's gonna be nice and smooth and fast now. Definitely waxing your board helps to maintain the speed of the board, plus it'll carry better over flat zones, like when you're on a cat track, for example. All right, everybody, so that's what you need to know to wax a snowboard. There are lots of different methodologies out there, and some of them get super technical. I like to keep it fairly simple so that I can spend more time on the mountain snowboarding and less time in the shop having to wax. But I think that this gets a pretty good job done. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll leave a link in the description for all of these fun tuning utensils. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next week on Andreas Schubert Snowboard Channel.